In today's episode of the Deadly Dozen podcast, we've got Steve, who's actually a member of DDHQ, so the headquarters at Deadly Dozen. Steve comes from the corporate world and he's also a ultra athlete. He has done both Deadly Dozen and Hyrox, and he's 63 years old. He won't mind me saying that. So before we start and get into the 6 questions, just add on to what I've just said there, Steve. Tell us a little bit about yourself, your ultra background, and who you are.
Okay, thanks, Jane, and thanks for inviting me along today. I've been running probably for about 35 years. I started in my sort of late 20s, got into road running to begin with, 10Ks, half marathons, and then I quickly got into fell running after that, hill running. And that took me on a course really that took me into more endurance-based events. I discovered that I wasn't particularly fast, so longer races tended to suit me. And I got into mountain marathons in the sort of mid-30s. They were 2-day events. You used to have to carry your kit and camp out overnight. So there was always a bit of sort of, long distance in me really. And I've been running pretty consistently over these years, but I suppose as I've got older, I've gone longer and slower. But I've got longer and longer, and I'm still going.
And what's the longest you've done?
106 miles. So that was...
Not for me. So 106 miles. And how old were you when you did that?
That was 2 years ago.
Oh, wow. So, and do you think you're getting better with age?
Yeah, funnily enough, I think I am because of experience.
Experience.
And I think that does count. That does help a lot in ultra running. And being able to apply various techniques, mental techniques, running techniques, alter your training, it definitely helps. And I think...
and how do you think jumping straight into fitness racing, because obviously I've seen you, so Steve also trains at the gym, is what I've seen is you're coming from an ultra background. So a lot of people that got into fitness racing that we see in the gym coming from a strength background, you come from the opposite, which was you've had all the zone 2 anyone could ever need. And it was more about, right, now I'm entering fitness racing. But actually you're quite fixed, aren't you? He's got the biggest cars in Macclesfield by the looks of them. And he's, so it's you were actually quite strong. And I was very keen to have you do like a pro Hyrox. And at the time it was like, you were going to be one of the only people in the UK to have done it. You've done the Deadly Dozen and smashed through that. So how did you find your ultra background? How did you find the transition into fitness racing?
Well, it's interesting you say that, because actually right from the very early days of my running, so back in my 20s, like 30 odd years ago, I was always quite interested and did gym-based work, circuit training. And to be honest with you, it's probably a bit of my dad. My dad used to do circuit training, years even before that. So this was in the days before people really started to think that strength training could be a good thing for running. Most runners in those days, and to an extent still today, just run. Okay. The recent phenomenon of doing more weight-based work and more conditioning work is relatively. The concepts have been around for a long time, but people haven't really done it. But I was always in that zone. So I've never just run. I've always tried to supplement it with other forms of cross training. So for me, it actually wasn't a change. It wasn't sort of something I've done in later years. It's something I've just built on. It's always been there, and I've always been a believer in it. But what's happened over the years, it's become a bit more conventional, a bit more accepted. I suppose, if you like, there's more research to back it up. So to me, they're always preaching to the converted. But what I've done over the years is I've been more focused and more structured about how I bring strength training into my running. And that's where I've learned to change it as I go along, and I've learned to adapt it for the specifics of my race.
Yeah, I've seen that. You were always very focused on the strength. He's the original hybrid athlete, essentially. And obviously going from your sporting background and into one of the reasons why I was so excited to get Steve on board with Deadly Dozen, being a member at the gym, is that he comes from a corporate world. Now, I obviously come from essentially the military, and then I owned a gym, and I've been in the fitness industry, and the fitness industry is all I know. So obviously I'm running a business, but I've not come from the corporate world. So now I've got this global company essentially now that's growing quite quickly. Steve's obviously watched a lot of that journey. Bringing you on board was exciting for me because here's someone that comes from the real corporate world. So can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, I've been my career spans about 35 odd years. I started off in sales, and my original degree was in marketing, and I did a master's that took me into IT. I went into IT actually in the days when offices literally just had typewriters. You might not know what a typewriter is, but they had
I know what one
typewriters.
is. Yeah.
So PCs came along. I saw an advert.
So you actually used a typewriter at work?
I had a typewriter to write my dissertation at university.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And
Wow.
And so I saw an advert in the local paper, and it said, "Come along and do a night school class in computing." I thought, oh, that sounds quite interesting.
Teach how to turn it on. You know, the bottom bit wasn't, and then the screen.
It almost was. It was. It is turn it on, and this is a spreadsheet, very basic. This is a Word-based document.
This is a floppy disk.
That's all it was. On the basis of that, I changed my career. I went from sales, went into sort of IT. Basically, I went back and did a master's in an MBA almost, but with a technology slant. And that set me off on a course for the last 30 odd years of always being involved in IT. In a corporate world, I've worked for suppliers, done big outsourcing deals. I've managed and been in negotiating contracts. The biggest one was about 1.8 billion.
Wow.
That was with the co-op when we were merging with another bank. I've done deals of several £100 million, and it was a great experience. But my skill set really was kind of getting on with people, solving problems, dealing with the bigger picture. And corporate world is quite complex sometimes, a lot of politics. But for me, it's been great. It's been very rewarding. I've had a good time. It's treated me well. You have your ups and downs, but I mean, I've enjoyed it. So for me, and I currently work for a company that does a lot of research in IT and technology, a company called Gartner. In their own right, they're quite a big company, about 5 billion turnover.
Fairly big then.
Yeah.
But what's small fry here?
But what they do is they produce a lot of research and anything to do with IT and technology. Yeah. Sometimes it's very technical, sometimes it's very business orientated. And it's almost like being in an industrial university. We're just pumping out knowledge and insight all the time. And my job is I work with various clients, big corporate clients like Marks and Spencer's and, for instance, and Jaguar Land Rover, big companies. And they use the insights that we've got to help them manage their IT, manage vendors, get better deals when they're negotiating with big vendors, et cetera, et cetera. So for my career has been quite, in some ways, a bit conventional, but I've just got to a point now where I'm just looking for something else, and just a stage in my life that I've got to. But coming into Adaptability doesn't, for me, is another great, exciting opportunity because I'm already learning stuff that I've never been exposed to in the corporate world. Mm-hmm. I'm used to big structures, big governance structures.
Reckless ginger blokes that just go all in.
Well, there is a bit of that involved, actually, but also the whole social media side and the way you guys are managing all that. I haven't ever been exposed to that. So I'm already learning loads, actually, just by being, only the early days of working with you. So hopefully I can bring some of that kind of experience of asking questions, the right questions, hopefully, and just get on with stuff. I'm quite adaptable. But I'm learning at the same time, so I'm just as excited actually as you are to be involved in this.
And that's the key, isn't it? Yeah. It's a diverse work team of ages, genders, everything that you've got to then sort of bring out the best of people because we all think differently. You need the sort of ones that are head in the clouds, forward thinkers, the analytical ones, the ones that stay calm, the ones that are a little bit, ones that are almost too trusting, ones that aren't trusting at all. You need all of that.
Yeah.
So it's that's why I was so excited that we're getting different people in.
Yeah.
So we'll jump straight into the 6 questions. And as you know, we have these 6 questions. We ask our guests these questions. Yeah. And it's interesting to see the different answers people have. So we'll jump straight in with number 1. What are your top 2 training tips?
Well, I'll relate all my answers, I think, to my ultra running background because that's what I've got most experience in. I mean, as you said, I've done some high roxes, I've done Deadly Dozen, and they're kind of nice events for me just to, give me a bit of variety. But ultra running and fell running, that's kind of where I've really earned my spurs. And when I look back at what I've done over the years, there's no magic formula here, really. I'm probably not going to say anything that isn't new, but when I was thinking about this before today, the first thing that stands out is consistency. Mm-hmm. Consistency, and I'm talking about over years, not just months or weeks. I'm talking about long-term consistency. So I haven't been running every single day for 30 odd years. I mean, I've had kind of the peaks and the troughs. And sometimes you get injured and sometimes, life gets in the way. But pretty much I've been doing something. Mm. And I think that, particularly for ultra running, there's something about it just builds up some resilience. I'll come to the mental side of it later, but also builds up some physical resilience. You learn how to pace yourself. You learn what your strengths and weaknesses are. You learn how to adapt around that. And so I think that consistency of training and approach over those years, and just having a bank of fitness. Mm-hmm. When I first started running, I was running with a bunch of guys in Glasgow. They were all older than me. I was like the young lad who came into the team sort of thing. I remember this older guy said to me, he said, Steve, he says, being fit, he says, it's like putting a penny in the bank every day.
Yeah.
Get every single day, put a penny in the bank. And he says, eventually you've got a little fortune in there. And I always remember that. And it's true. I think just keep topping it up. So I think the first thing is that long-term consistency. But like I say, it's not talking weeks and months. I'm talking years.
Years and decades.
Yeah. All right, the second one is I've learned this more recently. So this hasn't been something that's just been with me for a long time. This is really as a result of the reading I've done around the subject. I like reading articles and papers on fitness and talking to people. And sometimes I follow a bit of a fad. I'm kind of guilty of that. I try different things.
But it can be a good thing. In essence, we often say like 95% basics, fundamentals, 5% have fun. It could even be 10% have fun, try new things. It's actually really important to do that. Even with world-class athletes, it's, add a bit of spice.
Yeah, and I think so. I'm willing to experiment. I mean, I tried barefoot running for a while, and I got big into beetroot juice once, and that turned out to be a bit of a disaster in the race when I was.
You turned pink.
Well, almost actually. I was physically sick for about 2 hours and just vomiting.
Oh, on an ultra. Oh, right.
Anyway, so I learned that lesson. But what I've refined over the years, my training used to be fairly general, I would say.
Yeah.
Okay. For ultras, I just kind of translated my longer term experience into, well, I just need to keep going a bit longer.
Yeah.
But then what I've learned, and what's really paid off, particularly fun enough this year, so I'm still learning as I go along, is about being specific.
Yeah, specificity.
Yeah, specificity. Yeah.
Hard to say, isn't it? It took me about 3 years. Specificity.
Yeah, I was practicing it before and I still can't say it. And so where the gym's really helped, actually, is I've been really specific the last 12 months about getting my leg strength up. Yeah. Mountain ultras, the ultras that I do can be 100K, 100 miles, 5,000-6,000 meters of ascent. To be honest with you, a lot of the time you're walking or you're scrambling, sometimes literally climbing up gullies, right? So you need a lot of strength. You're not running for not even half of the time. So leg strength and body strength, but particularly leg strength, is really important. So I've done a lot of very specific exercises and training in this gym over the last sort of 9 months, pushing that sled over there and pulling it, doing back squats, and doing anything that's building specific leg strength. Sometimes I do one-legged exercises. Running, sometimes, if you think about it, it's a one-legged sport. Every time you fire off, it's one leg at a time. So I tend not to bother too much about upper body. I need a reasonable core, but I don't need to be, I don't need to.
Do you find your shoulders do tie though over the course of an ultra?
No.
Or the body collapses? No.
I think if you've got a strong core, that'll deal with the.
That's the key, because they often say, don't they, ultra athletes start to fold over towards the end because the core starts to fail.
So I focus on the core and the legs.
Yeah.
And
also you'll be building your back, and you'll be surprised even with holding the dumbbells, even with the barbell on the back, how much upper body and shoulders and when it comes to core, it's not just, people think abdominals, but it's your erectors, it's your lats, it's that whole trunk essentially is getting engaged.
Well, I've kind of focused on that through the conditioning classes in the gym. So I do very leg specific work, and I use the conditioning for the sort of all round body stuff.
And the conditioning for those that at this gym, which is the 5S's, we do circuit training, which we see as conditioning, mixed modality work basically, and then we have strength training classes. We essentially have strength classes and conditioning classes. Yeah.
And I've found that's really helped, and so that's kind of become my formula.
Yeah.
And also with the weights, I used to do high rep, low weight, thinking that would align itself well to ultra.
It's what most runners assume. But
now I've gone the opposite. Now I've gone very heavy weight and low reps. 5 reps is a max, and I'll just.
It's almost like polarized training, like they say with you do very high intensity and very low intensity. It's almost like with strength training. Runners always think, well, if I'm an endurance runner, I need to do endurance rep ranges. It's like, well, what's your aim in the gym? What's your aim? Your aim is to build strength. So why are you not doing the rep ranges that build strength? If your aim is to build endurance, go and do long duration. Aim to build strength. Well, I'm an endurance athlete, so I should be doing high reps. Yeah, but what's your aim? Well, to get stronger. We'll do the rep ranges that, and yes, all rep ranges will develop strength. All rep ranges will develop hypertrophy or produce hypertrophy muscle building. But when you do lower rep ranges, say 1 to 5, where generally you're going to be working around 75 to 85% and beyond of your 1 rep max, what would be an RPE 9 or 10, 8, 9, 10, is that's the load that's going to basically recruit the most muscle fibers, and it's going to really stimulate them fast twitch muscle fibers. You're going to get stronger quicker. Lift heavy, it's said, specific adaptation to imposed demand. You lift heavy, you get stronger.
And I've really benefited from that in the last 12 months. So even now, I'm 63, I'm still trying to refine the training, and I've noticed a big uplift in my performance, just this year through doing that. So I think being specific and the longevity, the long duration of training over the longevity of the training over those years has definitely helped a lot.
Makes sense. So jumping on to question 2. Following from training, what are your top 2 nutrition tips? Which is quite an interesting one for ultra athletes.
Well, this is you could spend a whole podcast probably talking about this. In the world of ultra running, I think personally, you eat and drink your way to the finish. Okay, if you can't do that, you're not going to finish. So no matter how fit you are, if you can't get your nutrition right, you're just not going to make it. And there's a whole art and science around it. It's a fairly still immature discipline or but a kind of practice within ultra running. Nobody's really kind of cracked it with the magic formula. Because everybody behaves a little bit differently.
There's no magic formula for everyone. That's sort of individuality, isn't it?
But also over the course of a race, over the course of 24, 30 odd hours of putting your body through a lot of pounding, you can land up with lots of stomach issues because you're basically just bouncing around a lot. And over the course of that race, what you want to eat also changes, what you feel like you want to eat. And bizarrely, you don't have a reflex to eat. Quite often, you don't feel hungry. So you lose a trigger. You lose energy, but you don't feel hungry. So sometimes you have to force yourself to eat.
Well, you're in a state of stress, aren't you? That your body's thinking, right, your muscles need energy. I can't be digesting right now.
Exactly, And so again, over the last few years, I've really tried to focus on what works for me. And a couple of things I've learned is, particularly in a race, the more liquid it is, the better. So I learned a few years ago, I was doing the West Highland Way race, which is a 96-mile race from Glasgow to Fort William. And I had a support crew with my best friend. It was his brother who was helping us out. And he just randomly gave me I remember it was a tin of Marks and Spencer's chicken noodle soup. For the next 5 miles, I was flying.
Oh, wow.
Like I just drank that soup, and what it showed me was the energy soup was full of bit of salt, bit of carb, had all the right ingredients in it. But it got into my system really quickly. And it wasn't like a sugar rush because it just took longer to go through. So in a recent race I did in North Wales, I was trying to drink my nutrition.
Okay.
So I was drinking protein, I was drinking soup, anything that in kind of energy like liquid form. So nutrition in these races is really important. Now this again specifically what I focus on now more than I ever used to, and again it's something I've changed over the last couple of years, is protein. So now in that particular race, I had one checkpoint that was actually close to where I was staying, and I had a little stash of protein drinks and a couple of other things. And I took that was towards the end of the race. At the halfway checkpoint where you've got a drop bag, I also had some protein in it. So I found that protein during a race helps, because I'm talking races like, over 30 hours.
And why did you find that? Why protein? Is it not the sugars that are coming in the protein drinks?
Well, it might be a bit of that, but I think, your body's just basically getting shook and just messed up and being pounded to pieces. So I think getting a bit of protein and it just helps to sort of keep you a bit glued together is kind of how I look at it. So you're obviously getting some raw energy out of it.
It might satiate you a bit as well.
Yeah, and it definitely does that. And then the protein also makes a massive difference to my recovery. So if I take protein quickly after a race, my recovery is noticeably better. So, and as you get to a certain age, there's a lot of research out there about the importance of protein generally in your diet. You know, older people need more protein. They also need to be doing more weight-based work, like you were talking about before. So I've also been focusing on that in my general diet about just getting more protein. And I wouldn't say I was necessarily protein deficient before, but I definitely look for a more regular inputs of protein, and I've actually built it into my race strategy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And is there a second tip that you give? It obviously, first one is essentially finding what works for you. Very much a liquid-based, getting lots of liquid in, and obviously for you, protein's a massive thing.
Yeah.
What would be a sort of second tip for nutrition, specifically for ultra then?
Hydration.
Hydration's key.
Yeah. So, I mean, what you get out of the hydration is several different things, but you as you know, Jay, and I'm sure you know the facts better than I do. Your body and your performance deteriorates quite significantly at small percentages of dehydration. And in some of these races, like the race a couple of weeks ago and another race I did in Gran Canaria earlier in the year, they were very hot. So you're sweating a lot. So first of all, you've got to get the liquid in just to replenish that. You also have to be building salts around it because you're losing salts. I quite often use salt tablets before a race and actually during a race. But being regularly on top of your hydration is important. Now, sometimes I'll mix just pure straight water, as well as having energy-based drinks. Because obviously with the energy-based drinks, you're getting some energy out of that, you get some electrolytes. I tend to run with a couple of flasks, so I've got a bit of a choice. And then the other reason why hydration is so important actually comes back to the food, because if I've eaten something at an aid station or I've eaten some of the food I'm carrying, I always drink afterwards just to help it get through my system quicker. So I don't drink first, I eat first and then drink. And I'm continually monitoring how I'm feeling. And in my head, I'm thinking about how my energy level's feeling. Do I need to eat something? Do I need to make myself eat something? I can normally tell when my energy starts to go. It's not a timing thing. I probably get to about 2 hours before I've got to eat something. But after that, you can just feel the energy ebbing away. Then I know I've got to act. And so it's food first and then drink, continuously drinking. It's a mechanism that you don't naturally get triggered to by your body. You don't feel like you're dehydrated. You don't feel like your mouth's dry. I mean, you're sweaty anyway, and you're a bit fatigued. But
so it's something you got to regulate essentially. Just constantly thinking of it.
You've got to manage it. You've got to be on top of it, and you've got to be on top of it before it hits you, because by then it's.
So that brings us on to obviously you're constantly thinking. So question 3, which is quite sort of specific to ultra athletes as well, if you're doing 100 milers, is what's your 2 mindset tips?
Right.
Shut off and just keep running.
Again, this is a really interesting area for ultra runners. You ask any ultra runner, and the first thing they'll normally say is, it's the mental side that'll get you through. Now, I've just said that the importance of nutrition and hydration, obviously you need that, but there is something really special about having the right mental attitude. And I'll give you some specific examples. The first big ultra I ever did was when I was 50, so that's like 13 years ago. Me and my mate decided we had to mark our 50th by doing something, so we decided to run the West Highland Way. It's a big race up in Scotland. It's got quite a high profile. We'd never done anything like that in our lives. We'd done probably in my case maximum of half that distance, and that was just in a training race. Before that, it was like marathons was the longest. So we were completely naive. We'd knocked out some long runs. We didn't really know what we were doing, if I'm honest. And we stood on the start line in this town called Mulgai outside Glasgow at 1 o'clock in the morning, because that's when the race started. For some bizarre reason, I don't know why.
Hideous, doesn't it?
And so you already haven't had any sleep even before you start. And it's the first time I'd ever done that race. But I stood on the start line and I thought, I'm going to finish this. I knew I was going to finish. I don't know why. It wasn't arrogance. I wasn't sort of. I didn't have a coach. I didn't have somebody saying, "Yeah, Steve, you can do it. You can do it." It was just I'm going to do it, and I did. And my mate Angus, we did as well. I hallucinated towards the end of the race.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, proper hallucinations. That was pretty weird. It's only ever happened to me once. I literally was running along, and at one point I was falling asleep, like you do in a car sometimes.
Yeah.
I was like nodding off like that, full of bizarre experiences. And we were going, me and my Angus go, yeah, how are you feeling? I said to him, how are you? I said to Angus, I've just hallucinated. He says, I've just seen an ostrich beside of the track eating. He says, I've just seen an old lady in a bus shelter. And you can see
you're
it
in the middle of nowhere.
in the middle of nowhere, in the middle of the night, and you know, because you're conscious, that it's not real. But the thing was, the lesson I learned then was, if I know I'm going to start when I start, so if I know if I'm going to finish when I start, I do.
And what is that mindset, though?
Well, I'll give you the counter example. So there's only 2 races I haven't finished. One was, they were both flat races as it happened, so I don't know if that had anything to do with it. One was a 50 miler and one was a 120 miler. And the 120 miler was from Liverpool to Leeds along the canals. In retrospect, pretty boring kind of race in any respect, other than the fact it was long. So maybe it wasn't really my sort of thing. But when I started when I stood on the start line in Liverpool, I just had an element of doubt. I thought, I'm not sure about this.
And was that because you hadn't trained enough?
No,
or just a feeling on the day?
It's just
so it's almost like you're saying it's intuition.
There is a bit of that, yeah. But the vast majority of races, I've always finished, and I've always known I'm going to finish, despite the fact I might not necessarily have trained optimally, might not be in the right space for whatever reason. I might not necessarily have planned it as well as I would plan it now. I don't know what you put it down to. It's almost like a gut feel, or it's an inner sort of self-confidence. But what I've learned again in this is where the experience comes in. If I hit a problem, now I know how to fix it or try to fix it. So I don't let the problem become a bigger problem by ignoring it. So I suppose I've got to a stage now where if I'm in a similar situation to the one I was in the races when I didn't finish, I might be thinking, actually, I know I've got to do something about it. So it's a fine line. But the vast majority of races I've finished because I'm even without proper optimal training and sometimes right approach on the day. But it was just, I knew I was going to do it.
And what would you say to someone that doesn't feel like that, though? So what's a mindset tip if someone says, well, I don't feel like I can finish? What does an ultra athlete need? Or let's apply it to any of the races like that. Because to a lot of people, Deadly Dozen, the fitness races are going to be like ultra runs for them, aren't they?
Yeah.
So what would you say to someone that feels like, well, I can't finish? Because you're saying that I get to a start line and I know I'm going to finish.
Yeah.
But I would say, not necessarily the majority of people, but a lot of people get to the start line and go, I don't think I can finish this.
Yeah.
And that applies to fitness races, ultras, because like I say, fitness races for a lot of people, it's like an ultra. It's a huge hurdle.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I would say don't be afraid to fail. Just give it a go. The number of people I've spoken to over the years, I've got a friend at the moment, for instance, she's gone from couch to 5K. And she was doing, 1 minute, have a rest, 1 minute, have a rest. And I spoke to her a few weeks ago and I said, why don't you just go and do a park run? You go from your 1K straight into a 5K, you'll do it. I know she can do it because, she's walked up Snowdon. So if you can walk up Snowdon, you can do a 5K. So sometimes I think people just need the reassurance, actually, that it's, first of all, it's okay to fail. It's better to start than not to try. But actually, you might surprise yourself how well you do just by going in with a relaxed attitude of all you got to do is finish. You don't have to win it. You don't have to break any records. But just going in with, I'm going to finish. And you'll be amazed, I think, how far people can go. There's a self-limiting mindset, I think, sometimes that gets in the way. And if you just relax around that and say, there is no consequence if I fail, who cares? Nobody's going to criticize. You're going to get plaudits for starting. Actually. So
I always say to people, if I put a gun to your head, you'll do it. And really think about it. I used to say it to recruiters. I say, if you had a gun at your head, you'd do it. And not as a threat, but I do think that everyone's got so much more in them. I think even if you were to walk, 50 mile, if someone put a gun to your head and said you're walking, you'd walk. And we've got far more in us than there. So that leads us to number 4 then. Is what are your top 2 tips for improving the quality of someone's life? And these can't be related to diet or exercise.
The first one is around my situation, but the situation of my peers. So the first thing I would say is age is no barrier. I think. I mean, I race in whether it's high rocks or deadly dozen or ultra races. My age group is 1% of the field typically. And by the time I finish a race with all the dropouts and everything, I'm probably about halfway. So so I've beaten quite a lot of people who are a lot younger than I am. So just because you're getting older doesn't mean you're not going to perform. Now, performing for me is just finishing. I'm never going to win anything. I measure my success in other ways. So I would say, don't get into a mindset where just because you're getting older thinks you've got to pull back. I would say do the opposite. Actually push yourself in other ways. Not in a manic way, not in a way that's beating yourself up. But don't get into this mindset of you're on a linear decline once you get past your 30, 40, all this rubbish about big milestone birthdays, 30s, 40s, 50s. It's all rubbish.
Well, they say, don't they? What do they say? You don't stop because you get old. You get old because you stop.
Exactly. Yeah.
It's one thing I would say is that age can be, you are going to be, things potentially are going to get harder, but it's understanding that obstacle is the way, that sort of stoic phrase, which is yes, you are going to be potentially slightly more prone to injury, or you are going to not recover as well from training as you age. And it's like, well, that's just adaptations that need to be made. If you get a severe, even life-changing injury, well, that's just an obstacle. And it's like, as you age, things might get harder. It might be harder to lose weight. It might be harder to gain muscle. It might be harder to recover. That's where the adaptations need to be made. It's just, it's almost like the long-term athlete development is the last stage is active for life. And your training goals might change at 60, where it might be more based on like living a healthy, good quality of life and not keeping up with, the young 20, 30-year-olds. But like I said on a previous podcast, is these days anyway, people put just as much of emphasis on the age groups. And for them, and it's about, for me, it's, if you said to me, what's your lifelong goal within the sport of fitness racing, it would definitely to be like, just be someone that's not necessarily competitive, but like succeeding at every age group, where you are like, you know what, you're doing well for that. If you've got the normative data on 40-year-olds, 50-year-olds, 60-year-olds, 70-year-olds, 80-year-olds, 90-year-olds, that's what we all want to be seeing, is basically 90-year-olds, 100-year-olds that are doing physical training. And there will be a decline, of course there will be. But then you'll also get just as many people that were more fit in the 60s than they were in the 20s, because they've got a different mindset.
Absolutely.
So what would be your second tip for that?
The second one is voice your goals. Verbalize them publicly. As
in tell people? They say, don't they? Tell us. I heard, who was it that said that? They said, tell us what I do. Was it? I think it might be an endurance app. They say they tell everyone, then they have to do it. Who was that? I don't know. It was someone said they basically, they come up with, they decide, right, I'm going to swim the channel. They tell everyone they know. And then it's like, right, well, I've got to do it now because I've told everyone.
I think there is something. I used to be the opposite. I used to kind of keep quiet about stuff. And I don't go around telling everybody I'm going to do an amazing time or anything. But if somebody says, what are you doing? What are your races for this year, Steve? I says, well, I'm going to do this and this and this. And this sort of set my stall out a little bit. I don't make any grand predictions about it, but I think it does help you to make, to keep that commitment.
Makes it real.
Makes it real, So I think that's a good thing to do, is just to verbalise it.
And it's almost seen as it's almost more sort of seen as a good thing to keep things secret, work in the dark. But actually, being that person that says, I am going to go do a deadly dozen, and everyone's there, and then you've got training partners, you've got people that are expecting you. It makes sense. So we'll move on to question 5 then. How do you define success? And what are your top 2 tips for achieving it?
Right. There's success for me. There's 2 ways of looking at this. When I'm looking at it from immediately after the race perspective, and as a race director, I know, because you've told me before, the question you get asked most after a race is, "Where's my results? Where's my time? How have I done? Where's my number? Where's my time? Where's my position?" Everybody wants to know that. So when I finish a race, the first metrics are, well, for an ultra, first one is actually to finish within the cutoff time. That's my number one goal. I'm a guy who's kind of edging up against the cutoff times.
And success for you is your performance goals is a big part of success, or?
That's the immediate goal.
Yeah.
That's kind of the immediate definition of success. That's kind of, I just want to know how I've done. I feel good if I'm on the right side of that right side of that number. And then I always look at where my position is relatively to the whole field. So again, I don't have a particular target on that. I just like to sort of feel like I'm comfortably inside the field, and there's loads of people ahead of me. There's a few people behind me. I'm just in the right space. But that quickly disappears. It's just kind of just a bit of a metric ticking. I think the thing that I've again learned over the years, and where I get the biggest kick actually, is actually feeling happy when I'm finished.
Yeah.
And it might not be necessary because I've done an amazing time. I don't tend not to do amazing times anymore. Sometimes it's just the fact you've finished and the plan's worked. You've had a good race. And again, the example I'll give you is a race that I did a few weeks ago, 100-kilometre race in North Wales. It took me 28 and a half hours. And I planned that race fairly meticulously over several months. I'd planned how I was going to approach every checkpoint. I'd planned and run over the course. I knew every inch of that course. I could visualize the whole course in my mind, lying in bed. That might sound a bit of a boring thing to do, but I could do. And so the success for me in that particular race actually was, with some adaptations, because I had to change. Every plan has to have a bit of adaptation actually on the day, but it worked. And broadly speaking, I learned a few things. Some things I would do a little bit differently. So the fact that I was pretty much on my target time, funny enough, as predicted by ChatGPT.
Yeah. It predicted your time, didn't it? I thought that was quite impressive through the metrics you put in.
Yeah, absolutely amazing. So I was spot on my time, but it was everything else. It all just worked. And also when I had a couple of moments during the race when things weren't working out, I'd adapted. I've learned over the years I need to make changes. In this particular race, it was about a third of the way in, still had like about 20 hours to go at that point.
Just a few then?
Yeah, just a few, yeah. And I wasn't feeling very good. I knew I just had to tough it out and it'd be okay. So it's just dealing with those moments. It's like the whole package is when you finish, you just think, yeah, that worked. The training, worked. The adaptation on the day worked and adjusted. And you just feel good. And there's nothing to, won't mean anything particularly other than to me. Yeah. But I just felt happy.
So success is finishing.
Success is finishing, but there's an emotion. The emotional high is worth more than the numbers. So feeling good about it, and sometimes I've actually felt a little bit emotional when you cross the line and it's all worked. Your body's in a bit of, your mind is in a bit of a state. So that's where I've defined success really is.
And what about across life? Is a racing the big part of your life now? Is in the age that you're at now and the career?
Yeah.
What is success across the board? Is when you think about success, the first thing you think is the racing side?
No. I mean, it's a big part of my life. And
but what is success to you then? As a whole, we mean across the board.
It's probably the same metric as actually, just being happy, right? I've been in periods of my life, in my corporate life, if you like, when I was in jobs when I was unhappy. That's just hellish,
Yeah.
Fortunately, it didn't last too long. I had to do something about it. Most people, you get to my age in your personal life, you've had your ups and downs. Hopefully, you've had more ups and downs. So I've learned the value of happiness, and contentedness.
Yeah.
I don't have any massive aspirations about being a superstar and a thing. I'm not interested in that, and I'm not. I just want to be happy. It sounds a bit glib, but I know when I'm on the path and when I'm not, and that's the most important thing I've learned in life so far is to stay being happy. Happy doesn't necessarily mean money. In fact, it very rarely means money. Time to me is more important than money now. As long as I've got enough to pay my groceries and my bills.
It's having enough, isn't it?
Yeah.
They say you don't need trainers to run, but they certainly help.
They certainly help. Yeah.
And I think it's the same with money. What I always say with money is I think it's clear in a lot of studies, and I think money doesn't necessarily buy happiness, but when you've got none, it's horrendous.
Yeah.
And that to me is the key principle for me when it comes to money is having enough for what you require.
Yeah.
So it's what would be, if you were to say then 2 quick tips to help people from your life that you would think will help to find success?
I would say, and I can apply this to my personal life, my work life, and to my fitness life, is never stop learning.
Yeah.
Keep looking for ways of changing as you get older, or as you move into different sports, you need to change the way you approach things. Be open. Don't get stuck in this is the only way I'm going to do it. If you're a runner, don't stick with I'm just going to run. There's better approaches, and the approaches that you need as you get older and as you move between different, they need to change. So I would say, be open to alternatives. Talk to people. Look at what's happening in the world. Look at what's happening in the research. There's lots of great stuff out there. Having said all that, hopefully it doesn't sound like a contradiction, but the other thing I've learned is the guys that I mentioned earlier that went running with back in when I was in my 20s, their core week was 16 200-meter reps in Kelvin Hall Indoor running track once a week. We should do a tempo run on a Sunday was a long run.
Yeah.
They covered nearly all the bases that even a modern day running program would put in. They didn't do any strength work.
Just fundamentals.
The fundamentals I've noticed haven't really changed too much, but some of the nuances.
Well, they say in the strength and conditioning field, we have a saying where we say the new training method that you come up with, the Russians were doing 50 years ago. Yes. It's fundamentals, and it's people think, it's something new, and the fitness industry does go through cycles, and you see it where you see like everyone's like zone 2 mad, and then previous to that they were hit mad, and then before that they were aerobic mad. We've seen it in combat sports, boxers going out, jogging, doing miles, and then all of a sudden everyone's like, you don't need to do that, do HIIT training, do Tabata, and then it was like, zone 2 again, and you see these cycles coming round where in essence they become trendy. But the fundamentals always remain. And what would your second tip be?
I think just keep refining it.
Refine. So sort of be proactive, reactive, and refine. It's almost like what we do as coaches is sort of essentially doing that, just modifying the program, test, run the program, and modify the program.
Absolutely.
So on to question 6, which is the last of the main questions. What top 2 tips are you giving yourself for the future?
Well, the first one is I'm still setting quite ambitious goals. So, for instance, next year, my plan is this is me verbalizing publicly.
You're telling everyone now.
Right, I'm telling everybody now. I've just done the 100-kilometre UTS race in North Wales. That was 6,700 metres, 32 hours to do that. Next year, we're going to do the 100-miler.
Wow.
And that's got 48 hours.
So what's that? So in kilometres. Oh, wow, yeah.
So that's 165 kilometres.
So it's literally just because it's 100. So it's the 6.
Yeah, so there you've got 48 hours to do that. And funny enough, after the 100-kilometre race, going back to ChatGPT, I put in my result into ChatGPT, plus my training data, and I said to it, do you think I could finish this race? And it came back and said yes. So if it says yes, I'm going to go for it.
It does have, apparently... AI does have a bias towards being quite positive. You put in your writing, it says, this is really well written. When I put in a paragraph in it and say, does this read well? It says, you're quite a good writer, and then says, change all of it. No, it definitely has a bias towards that. But no, one thing that shocked me with ChatGPT and AI, me coming from an S&C background, it was something I've written about in my newest book, is my old manuals. I when it first came out, when it first became mainstream, I put in, how do you back squat? And it went, and I was like, oh God, that's better than how I wrote it. Less spelling mistakes. And and now I ask it really nuanced stuff on strength and conditioning. And it's really good.
It's incredible, isn't it?
It really is.
And on top of it saying, yes, you can do it, Steve, it also said, here's the training program based on the principles which, I believe in and I've learned over the years.
But it's still you, no matter how good AI is. This is something we spoke about earlier, which is no matter how good the data is, the science, no matter how good the technology is, you still have to run the mile, or you still have to run the 100-miler. It might be able to tell you your respiration rate, your heart rate, your lactate levels, all these different things, and analyze the data and tell you where you went right and wrong. At the end of the day, it's still you doing it. And that's the bottom line. So it is incredible, isn't it?
It is amazing, yeah. So I think using these new tools, which when I started running, we didn't even have smartphones.
We didn't even have computers.
Well, we didn't have computers. We used to have typewriters flipping.
You had a quill.
Almost. And then the final point, the slightly more philosophical one, is going back to what makes me feel good after a race, just being happy. Being happy in your life is important. You don't know how long you've got. I don't mean that in a morbid way, but enjoy it while you can.
Memento mori.
Momentum, which is why it's so exciting to get involved with Deadly Dozen, with UJ, and do some PT work in the gym, because I'm following my passions then at a time of my life when I've got more time to do it. And what a great opportunity that is.
Yeah, fantastic. So that leads us on to the final tip. So this is the 13th tip.
Okay.
And originally we wanted this to go against the grain, but that can actually be quite hard to think about. So the final tip is literally just the tip that you want to leave with the audience to finish. What's it going to be?
I think my final tip would be, don't be afraid to fail. I've done a lot of races that I've finished. I've done some races I haven't finished. I've tried things that have worked for me. I've tried things that haven't worked for me. There's no embarrassment in failing. And you might feel embarrassed. Generally speaking, I think other people will look at you and say, congratulations for starting that. I wouldn't have even tried that. So I think don't be afraid of any negatives. You don't know until you push yourself. And you don't have to be pushing yourself to extremes like perhaps I'm doing in some of these races. But take that limiting factor away, and you'd be surprised how far you can go.
Yeah, I always say, this sounds really horrible, but I used to say to people jokingly, people don't really care. Like you think everyone cares about what you've done, and like they don't care enough. Like they don't. And when I used to do combat sports, I was most worried if I lost. I was most worried that I had to go in school the next day and say I lost a fight. And I was like, really, it's like on the beach where people say I'm self-conscious of my body. Yeah, there might be some arses out there, but most people are more conscious about themselves. They're more self-focused. It's almost like this main character syndrome where we're like, I'm going to run a Deadly Dozen or a High Rocks and I've not completed it. No one really cares. What they care about is that, they care. They do care. It sounds horrible that in some ways, but they do care, but they don't care like in a way that they think you've not finished. They're focused on themselves. And actually when they do focus on other people, in general, they're quite supportive, aren't they? It's not, they're just, that's what I found with everything is people are supportive. I mean, the problem is when you're a bit more like me, which we give it a bit of gob to people and give it the big one, is the more you give it the big one, the more harder they'll hit you, won't they? So it's like if I'm saying I'm going to do this time and this time, and then when you don't do it, that's when they give you a hard time. So the key, if you don't want people to be harsh on you, is to be modest. When you're not modest, people go in. They think, right, he's full of himself, let's get him. And that's the way. People like an underdog, not someone that gobs off, basically. So that was fantastic, Steve. Like I say, it's a really good insight, because obviously you stem from the ultra world, which is a little bit different to fitness racing, but it's coming into that. And obviously you've come from the corporate world. So like I said at the start of the podcast, I'm really excited of getting your insight into everything. Obviously, I'm in my sort of mid to late 30s now, and I'm keen to learn from yourself. There was, I think Charlie Munger said they say that you can't teach an old dog new tricks, and he says you can't teach the new dogs the old tricks. So hopefully you've got some old tricks for me for Deadly Dozen,
right? Okay,
and we'll be good to go. Cheers, Steve.
Great, pleasure.
Fantastic.
Jeff. Thanks a lot.